So before I start this match week preview, I have two very quick things that I am going to be talking about. One is that this is going to be a very quick one because I have to go to a Giants game tonight. Got to do another baseball vlog, and I will be leaving roughly about 40 minutes from now, so it's going to be a quicker kind of preview than usual. And the second thing is that I am going to be going to Miami next week. I'm going to be there for 4 days, which means that what I'm going to do on Sunday is that I'm actually going to just review the game on Saturday, but then I'll also review the game on Sunday later on that night, because apparently this week the Sunday games, which there are 3 of them, but this game between the Sounders and FC Dallas, which is the last game of the week, doesn't kick off until 7 p.m. my time. So because of that, I have to do this kind of like a little two-parter, and the fact that I'm leaving on Monday and I'm leaving at 5 in the morning to go to the airport. So yeah, there is no way I am going to do like a full review after the game. I have to go to bed straight away, and I'm gonna actually do that right when I finish doing the review. But either way, without further ado, let's get into the preview of this week. And I'm doing this preview in a little bit different kind of format. Notice that all the red kind of wording are just where the teams are in terms of the standings and how many points they are above the red line or below the red line. And I'm doing this because we are getting to the home stretch of the MLS season. We are getting to a point where it is really make or break time for most of these teams that is dangling around the playoff line, and for those teams that are fighting to win the Supporters' Shield. But we start off with Columbus versus Houston. So Columbus, they are 10-6-7. They play 23 games and they have 36 points. Houston are 22 games that they have played. They are 7-6-9. They have 27 points. Columbus is 7 points above the red line, while Houston is 7 points below the red line. Now, Houston, of course, did win their U.S. Open Cup game. It's kind of a little bit of an upset for them because I thought LAFC coming in that game was the favorite. And then, of course, they won that one through penalties. And it was a game that they actually were leading for majority of the game until they blew a 3-1 lead late in the game, and in just typical Dynamo fashion, they just cannot able to close the game, and that one had to go to extra time. I mean, it's just, this has been what the Dynamo has been throughout this season. This is a team that I really think is a team that out of every single other team in MLS, this is the one that just always tends to have problems closing games down. And, you know, this game against Columbus, I don't really think that they could potentially win this, mainly because Columbus, you know, they are sort of getting good again, and they have just got Miram back in their squad, and I'm assuming he will be starting in this game for Columbus, and that certainly will help Columbus because, you know, we saw what Miram did with the Crew last season and how he was such a big impact. And the fact that Houston is on the road. And Houston tends to never win on the road. So I expect Columbus to win this one. And for Houston, you know, that playoff hope might have just disappeared in that last couple of losses that they have at home. They needed to win those games at home if they still want to have a chance. And now they lost their last couple of games and not really in a very good form, except the fact that they are now in the Open Cup final. Yeah, they're in trouble in terms of the playoff race. And then moving on into the next game, and speaking of the playoff race, this is pretty much the biggest game in terms of determining the playoff race. And by the way, I do apologize if the Philly sign is kind of like glared up by the lights that I have in my ceiling. But yeah, New England, they will be taking on Philly. New England, of course, are 7-8-7. They have 29 points, while Philly are 8-3-11 with 27 points. New England is 2 points above the red line. Philly is 2 points below the red line, and it just doesn't get any bigger than that. I mean, you have two teams that is just literally neck and neck. One team is above the red line, one team is below the red line, and I really think the winner of this one, or I shouldn't say I really think, it's going to happen. If the winner of this game, if Philly wins this one, then they would be above the red line. And if New England wins this one, then they will build up a 5-point gap on Philly. So this is a massive, massive game for both teams. And it's really hard to see who exactly is the favorite coming into this one, because New England, despite the fact that they are at home and that they are kind of the fresher team, considered the Union did play their midweek game in the US Open Cup, which they won 3-0. New England has the fresher legs, and they are at home, which they have been pretty good so far at home. But the problem is, New England has been in this really bad run ever since the calendar month turned to June. And for the Union, you know, this is a team that has been okay on the road. Well, they've been pretty decent lately on the road, but at the same time, I just wonder, you know, with that US Open Cup game in the midweek, and now they have to travel to New England for this big game, you know, will those players that are going to be, that were very decent in the game against the Fire in the midweek, and then in the previous big kind of road game, will those guys kind of show up? Guys like Corey Burke and Deutschko and all those other players, will they actually show up and actually can finish for once? Because, you know, the Union are a team that are kind of like the worst finisher in the league. They just always tends to not able to put away those chances. So yeah, this is really a tough one to call. I would say maybe this could end up in a draw between both of these teams, and I'm pretty sure, I don't know if that really benefits anybody. I mean, I think maybe it benefits New England because they're still above the red line, but the fact is that Philly is still in striking distance around them, and that if you drop points at home against a team that you're fighting for the playoffs, that is definitely not very good. But meanwhile, moving on into the next one, Chicago, they are 24 games that they have played, 6-5-13, they have 23 points, while the Red Bulls are 14-2-6, they have 44 points. There's literally a 21-point gap difference between both of these teams. Chicago are 6 points below the red line, while the Red Bulls are only 4 points behind Atlanta for the Supporters' Shield standings. And really, this one is pretty easy. I mean, you know, I know earlier in the year Chicago pulled a bit of an upset against the Red Bulls by winning it at Red Bull Arena 2-1, but I just don't see how this is going to be an upset. I mean, Chicago, they are on a cliffhanger right now. I mean, this team have now lost, what, 7 in a row in all competition and 6 in a row in the league. And you're playing a Red Bulls team that are hungry to try to get wins and are just breathing down Atlanta's neck in terms of the Supporters' Shield race. So I really think the Red Bulls should be able to easily win this one over Chicago. And Chicago also had a midweek game which they lost, so that's definitely not going to give them confidence coming into this one. So yeah, I expect the Red Bulls to win this one, unless we might get another big surprise again like what we did last week. But yeah, but moving on, and speaking of big surprises, both of these teams that play each other this week were the big surprise of last week. Colorado, of course, knocked down the Galaxy at home, while the Quakes pulled off the biggest shock of the year by beating FC Dallas, the best team in the Western Conference. And Colorado, of course, coming into this game 5-5-12, they have 20 points, while the Quakes coming into this game 3-7-12 with only 16 points. I don't really need to tell you guys how many points they're behind in the playoff race, because, you know, you probably would know it, and I also know how far we are below the red line. I mean, I don't even need to mention it anymore. Both of these teams are probably not going to make the playoffs, and in many ways, I really think this is the wooden spoon derby between both of these teams. I mean, I feel like both of these teams are equally the worst team in MLS, and whoever loses this one will get much closer to the Wooden Spoon Awards. So yeah, it's gonna be a game that, you know, one thing I will say about this game is that this is a game for a chance for either of these teams to get back-to-back wins. And I don't think a lot of people would think that a Colorado versus San Jose Earthquakes match will be a game that will be kind of the stake of this game will be back-to-back win. And for the Quakes, it's back-to-back road wins, which is something we haven't done in a long time. And for the Rapids, it will also be back-to-back wins, which surprisingly they actually have done this before. They done it when they ended that miserable 8-game losing streak, and then following the game, they went on the road to snap their own miserable losing streak on the road and won back-to-back games. So yeah, it's going to be a pretty interesting kind of game, although I'm pretty sure nobody is going to watch this one because the quality of play is going to be pretty bad. But moving on into the next one, RSL versus Montreal. So RSL currently 10-4-9. They have 34 points, while Montreal are 9-2-13. They have 29 points and are currently 5th. RSL are 4 points above the red line, while Montreal are 2 points above the red line. But Montreal has played 2 more games than the team that is currently in 6th place, which is New England, and also 2 more games than the team that is currently in 7th place and hunting them down, which is the Union. And obviously Montreal made a couple of big signings in deadline day of the transfer window. First of all, they got Quincy Amarikwa from the Quakes, but they did have to give up Dom Oduro to us. But probably the biggest signing that they have made so far is bringing in Bakary Sagna to this team. And I'll tell you what, this is a big signing for Montreal. And I know Sagna is just kind of a left back, but you know, Sagna is a guy, if you don't know, he was part of that Man City team back in, I think, 2013 or 2014, during the year when Man City win the league. And you know, this is a guy that is definitely going to help them in that fullback position. It's a very kind of big name in Europe. And, you know, maybe that name could potentially get them into the playoffs, and maybe that experience will get them over the hump. And, you know, for RSL, though, you know, this game is a very interesting one because they're playing another team that are fighting for playoffs, or a team that is trying to stay in playoffs, and themselves is also kind of like fighting to try to stay above the red line. Now, the good news is this is a home game for RSL, so I'm assuming this should be an RSL win, unless they do something they did when they play against the Rapids and the Quakes, where they just drop points against the worst team in the league. I mean, right now for RSL, they just cannot afford to drop any more points at home. We know they are very bad on the road, so if they want to potentially make the playoffs, they got to make sure they get every single point at home. Otherwise, teams like Vancouver could potentially catch them, and even Seattle could potentially catch them up in the 6th spot and drop them down to 7th place. But moving on into the next match, LAFC, they take on Sporting KC. So Sporting KC and LAFC coincidentally actually have the same record. Both team played the exact same amount of game, and both team has 10 wins, 6 draws, and 6 losses, and both team has 36 points. LAFC is 6 points above the red line, while Sporting KC is the same thing. So basically, both of them are currently tied for 3rd place. And you know, for LAFC, they obviously made a big signing in the transfer window by getting Christian Ramirez, although it's kind of a confusing kind of signing in my opinion, considering the fact that I think LAFC, when you look at this team, one of the biggest weakness that they have is got to be that midfield. And I remember that I talked about how in that reaction video with Ramirez going to LAFC, and how I said that, you know, LAFC need to get another midfielder because they just don't have a natural kind of holding midfield on their team after Marc-Anthony Kaye went down. And, you know, I also said that Atuesta, you know, he's kind of a good kind of holding midfield, but he's kind of like a holding midfield that should be coming off the bench, but not starting. And the fact that now they are starting him, and you saw how when Atuesta was starting in the midfield, I think back in May, you saw how bad it got for LAFC and how they kind of like in this very similar stretch that they were back in May, which was them going on this winless run. I think this is now 4 games without a win for LAFC, although they have played a lot of tough teams doing these 4 games. They play like the Galaxy and the Red Bulls doing that stretch. And, you know, it's going to be interesting to see what they're going to do in terms of the midfield. Or actually, I don't know. Like, they can't really sign anybody else because the deadline is already over. So do they think about dropping a couple of their attacking piece like Lee Guin or Benny Feilhaber and drop them into the holding midfield role to do that? Is going to be an interesting thing of what Bob Bradley will do in that midfield for LAFC. And for Sporting KC, obviously they got a huge 1-0 win against Houston, a win that really kind of stopped partially the bleeding that they've been on, and it was also their first clean sheet that they had in a long time. And Sporting KC also made a couple of signings. They made a signing that was a center back that comes from Celta Vigo, and they also probably the biggest recognizable name that they made during this transfer window signing is bring in Naismith back in the team. And you know, it's an interesting kind of signing for Sporting KC bringing Naismith back, because Naismith is a midfielder, and I'm assuming he's gonna probably replace Johan Crozet in that midfield for Sporting KC. Although one thing I'm confused about this team is that why is this team not thinking about getting a number 9? I mean, I know that this team has always tended to lack that number 9 ever since Dom Dwyer left this team, and it seems like Peter Vermees is finding a way to try to play this out without a true number 9. But I really think it just makes them much easier if they actually get a true number 9. And also, you know, guys on this team that currently play in the attacking midfield and also in the midfield, guys like Johnny Russell, Felipe Gutierrez, and also Daniel Shallery is guys that I don't think you should always rely on scoring you goals. And so far, they've been kind of relying on those guys to score goals, and so far it's been effective. But you can pretty clearly see that there is started to be problems, and how guys that they've been relying on scoring goals and those midfielder that they've been relying on as a kind of goal-scoring threat is started to dry out a little bit. Shallery is started to struggle. Russell, I already talked about how he's kind of struggling. And Gutierrez, of course, just got back from injury, so you don't know how he's going to go. So, yeah, I'm kind of surprised Sporting KC did not go for a number 9, but I'm assuming probably in the winter transfer window they're going to get a number 9. I mean, surely, the only reason why Sporting KC is not very good, besides the defense is an absolute mess right now, is that they just don't have a true number 9 on their team. But moving on into the next game, and speaking of defense, this game might be a optional in terms of defense, because the Galaxy are playing against Minnesota. Galaxy are 10-5-8. They have 35 points, while Minnesota is 9-1-13. They have 28 points. The Galaxy are 5 points above the red line, while the Loons are 6 points below the red line. And the reason why I said this game might be defense optional is because both of these defense are absolutely horrendous. And both of these teams definitely have very good attack, with the Galaxy having guys like Zlatan on their team, and I'm pretty sure he's going to have an absolute field day against that Loons back line. And Minnesota, they obviously have Darwin Quintero that will also have fun with that Galaxy defense. So, in conclusion, I really think this is going to be like a Galaxy versus Orlando City game again, where there is going to be a whole ton of goals, and don't be surprised if Zlatan might score another hat-trick. And I maybe this could be like a 5-4 kind of game. And as a neutral, I definitely would want to stay tuned into this game, because I'm assuming there's going to be a lot of goals that is going to be scored in this game. Consider how bad the defense is for both teams. But, you know, for Minnesota, obviously, they are now on this brutal 5-game road trip. And if they want to keep their small hopes of playoff dream alive, they got to win this game. And for the Galaxy, you know, they need to rebound after what happened against the Rapids, where for whatever reason they lost to them, and the defense was absolute garbage again. And they got to make sure that the defense is going to be at least decent, but also the attack need to help them out a bit, because really, I really think this is going to be a high-scoring game. I think this is going to be a free-scoring game between both very bad defense and both very good attack. But meanwhile, moving on into the next one, the Timbers, they play against the Whitecaps. The Timbers are 10-7-3. They have 37 points, and they also played the second fewest game in MLS with only 20 games played, while the Caps are 8-6-9, and they have 30 points, and they played 23 games. Portland are 7 points above the red line, while the Caps are 4 points below the red line. And you know, for Portland, their winning streak, or not winning streak, but their unbeaten streak is currently at 15 games, and there is a good feeling that that might be extended to 16 games. And Portland definitely made a couple of big signings too in the transfer window deadline. Well, I shouldn't say signings, more like bring some of those guys that was part of that championship run for the Timbers in 2015 back into the squad. Guys like Milano and Philadephia is now back with the Timbers. I'm assuming Philadephia is going to be starting in that left back row, which I'm assuming Valentin might be dropping down in terms of the pecking order, which, you know, I don't know if that is a good idea. Consider I think Valentin has been very good so far in that left back role, but I think Philadephia is definitely a big upgrade for them. And then of course Milano will definitely help out in terms of the midfield and on the attacking end of play. And this is just a case for Portland that it's just the rich just got richer for them. I mean, this team, we know that they are on this unbelievable record-breaking unbeaten streak, but this is a team that looked very kind of balanced, and now they added more good player on their team. This team could potentially win the MLS Cup. And for those that think that this team might be stumble along the way and that this unbeaten run is eventually going to run out and then they start on a bad stretch, yeah, you know, that's not going to happen. This is a very dangerous Timbers team, and I wouldn't bet when they come into playoff time that this team could definitely go all the way into the MLS Cup final. But for Vancouver, well, yeah, this is a tough situation for the Whitecaps because you got a good point against NYCFC, but now you have to go on the road and you have to play another good team in the Western Conference, and you have to play a team that hasn't lost a single game since April. So, yeah, good luck, Whitecaps. Hopefully you don't get drop points and lose more ground to RSL in this game, and hopefully you, of course, will make the playoffs, because if you don't, then you are pretty much screwed, because Alphonso Davies is leaving for you this year, and that this is your last chance for you to do some big things before you're going to have a pretty uncertain future and you're along the way. But now let's move on into the Sunday games, and we're going to start off with TFC versus NYCFC. So TFC, of course, they have played 22 games. They have won 6 games, 5 draws, and 11 losses. They have 23 points, while NYCFC, 14 wins, 2 draws, 6 losses, 44 points. They have played 23 games. TFC is only 6 points below the red line, while NYCFC is 4 points below the Supporters' Shield standings. And really, for TFC, you know, this is going to be a game that, it's going to be an interesting one for them, because this is a team that went all the way across the other side of the country to play in the Canadian Championship, and now they have to go back to play against NYCFC. You know, it's definitely going to be tough, although this is an NYCFC team that have really struggled recently, and I think the big part of this struggle is because, you know, most of these guys are still trying to learn the Dom Torin system, and how Dom Torin has just completely changed the system that Patrick Vieira puts in this team, and it's no wonder why they are kind of struggling lately. And you just wonder, this kind of mid-season kind of coaching move that NYC have made might have doomed their Supporters Shield kind of race, and that they might doom themselves to potentially compete in the Supporters Shield standings. Because I really think for NYCFC, coming into this year, I'm pretty sure a lot of NYCFC fans not only want to get to the playoffs, but they want to win the Supporters Shield. This team definitely has good enough squad and good enough players to make it there, but because of this mid-season coaching move, and that they bring in a new manager that completely changed the style of play, it has really kind of disrupted the rhythm of this team. And I think TFC can definitely take advantage of that in this game, being at home. And if they can win this one, then TFC, this is a team that could be very dangerous if they do get above the red line, and this team could definitely maybe even go all the way again. Although I just think that for TFC, with all these catching up that they've been doing, and that they're getting guys back to healthy, will they still have enough when playoff time becoming a thing? But moving on into the last two games, DC United, they take on Orlando City. So DC United currently play the fewest game in MLS with only 19 games. They have won 4, draw 6, lost 9. They have 18 points, while Orlando City have played 23 games. They have won 7, draw 2, but lost 14 games. And they have also won 1 out of their last 12 games, and they only have 23 points this season. DC United is 9 points below the red line, while Orlando City is 6 points below the red line. And, this is a game that DC United's got to take advantage of it, because Orlando City right now is just in a very bad run, and that I really think this DC United team will really put a lot of pressure on this Orlando City defense, which we all know that Orlando City has the worst defense right now in the league. And I think that despite the fact Orlando City is only 6 points below the red line, I just don't think that they can make the playoffs because of how shambolic that defense is. I mean, that defense is not even an MLS level defense, and not even a USL level defense. That's like an amateur defense that Orlando City has. And I think DC United will definitely have a field day against it. Maybe Wayne Rooney might have a field day against it, but I expect DC United to win this one. And if they do not win this one, then you can say goodbye to their tiny playoff chances that people are still talking about. But moving on into the final game, the Sounders, they play against FC Dallas. So the Sounders, they play 22 games. They have won 8, lost 9, and draw 5, and they have 29 points, while Dallas have 12 wins, 6 draws, 4 losses, and they have 42 points, and they have played 22 games this season. For the Sounders, they're 5 points below the red line, while Dallas are 6 points below, not the red lines actually, but actually the Supporters Shield. Just pretend that's a Supporters Shield standings there. But yeah, the Sounders, of course, they're doing their Enro, coming back from the dead in the second half to potentially make the playoffs. While Dallas, hopefully that loss against the Quakes was just a fluke, and that it's not going to be like last season where they just got on a complete collapse. And this is kind of a game that for the Sounders, they certainly could potentially win this one and grind out another victory like they've been doing so far, doing this good unbeaten run. While Dallas, they need to figure out how to actually properly finish and put the ball into the back of the net, because in the last game, that was a huge issue with this team. So this one is another one that is really tough to call, because Seattle is in a very good form, while Dallas, despite the loss against the Quakes, I think this is still a very good team. So this definitely could be a very kind of interesting kind of matchup. And yeah, that is pretty much it for all the games that I'm previewing this week. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think is going to happen in all 11 of these games. Make sure you guys leave your prediction below. And yeah, I, of course, will see you guys next time.